We are live. Hope everybody's doing well. I am going to just make sure that we're live and my settings are good. Yes, we are. And then Jay will be joining us in a few minutes. Just give me 1 second. We are live. All right. No echo because I'm killing YouTube. So yeah, a couple of days ago, I saw the article by Ralph Blumenthal that was published in the Debrief that he had tried to get published in the New York Times, and then I don't know how Jay and I connected, but we did, and I asked him to be on the show, so he's here, and I will bring him in now because I really enjoyed reading about his story, and I want to hear more. How's it going, Jay?
It's going great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Who are you? What do you do? So what do you do for a living?
I don't know. What are you even? Right. Well, my name's JK. Gosh, how do I synopsize this? Well, first of all, these days I'm the co-founder of the Experiencer Group, which is a private member site for anomalous experiencers, and that started back in February, and that is partially the context for like how I kind of blipped up on Ralph's radar. So the Experiencer Group is a site dedicated to support, curiosity, and community for people who've had anomalous events of all kinds. So that could be non-human entities, UFOs, out-of-body experiences, near death, precognition, like all forms of kind of like the experiencer realm, right? And we've got like a custom built social site. We do a lot of like private like support group Zooms. We do a lot of like event AMAs. So we'll bring in special guests for the members to chat with. So like we've had Leslie Kane, Jeff Kripal, Richard Dolan, folks like that come in and just talk to our group. In a way that's not public, and so that we can kind of get to some of these deeper questions that aren't necessarily like, ready for TV or ready for Twitter in terms of like, like a lot of this stuff there's a lot of sensitive topics involved with situations like this, and people. And there's been so much, it's nice for it just to be that group. And so the Experiencer Group has been like a really fantastic situation for me. Like it's been a growth experience. So anyway, like before that, I went to art school. I live in New Jersey. I've lived out here on the East Coast in the New York City metro area for 21 years now, I guess.
And I don't know if I told you, I grew up in Long Island, so that's where I started. I started out in Long Island and ended up in Flushing, and I used to visit my grandmother in Clifton, New Jersey. I'm not sure if it's anywhere near you, but
I know Clifton. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was in Clifton like 2 weeks ago. So I went to art school at SVA at School of Visual Arts. I got a fine art bachelor's, and then I went to school for film up at Bard College upstate, and then I started working in TV. You work in TV. I used to work in TV. I mainly worked for the Discovery Channel and their properties. So like Animal Planet, Discovery, TLC, all that stuff. And I was a junior level like associate producer on a lot of like quote unquote nonfiction shows, so like travel shows, there's like those survival shows, things like that, right? And so doing writing and doing like functional producing as an associate producer or a field producer for stuff like that often, right? Kind of an uncredited writer often as well. And so I did that for a period of years, and as you know, that's a hard grind. Like working in TV is a really, really hard grind, and like people don't recognize often. Some people do, but a lot of people don't. That we're talking like 80-hour weeks easy, you know, and that's like, that can be like on a good week, it could be 80 hours, like on a
Yeah,
show
it's a
like that.
lot.
Yeah. And so, you know, like at a certain point I was like, what am I doing? Like, you know, like where is this going? Like, do I feel good about, you know, do I feel good about what I'm doing? Right. And, and, you know, I think that there's, so it was kind of part of my kind of like, there's a point where like, basically like I went from kind of like being a I dove into having that kind of a career and burying my head in the sand because I didn't want to be an anomalous experiencer, if that makes sense. Like I was
Right.
trying to
No, it
like,
does.
yeah, and like part of it is that like, you know, it's a long form answer to your question, but like there, like, and this is kind of common for some people, like getting jobs where you're going to be up all night because you don't want to be alone in your own house. Like at a certain, so I used to work as a bartender before I worked in TV. I started working in TV so that I'd have like weird hours, and like it really kind of like there was, so anyway, so like I
So you try
transitioned
basically you were trying to avoid experiences by taking those jobs.
in a way. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
there's a whole system like towards like my late 20s where things were just getting so, it was just, it was such a regular pattern, or it was an irregular pattern, but like it was, and it was something that I couldn't predict, but it happened so frequently that like I was like, I need to, I was doing everything I could, trial and error, to like to see what could break it up, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And so take me to your first anomalous experience when you were younger.
Sure. Okay, so and it's kind of a strange one, but like the first anomalous experience that I remember was when I was about 3 or 4 years old. I was living in Fort Wayne, Indiana at the time, and I was in my bedroom, and I was shoving like a plastic bin of toys, like across like my carpeted floor, and I looked up, and there were these two like strange, like shimmering, like bipedal forms that just like blipped in. And I'd never seen anything like that before. I've never seen anything quite like that since. And you know, at that age, like you know, when you're that young, like so much is new to you. Like it's like at that age, almost everything that you encounter in a way is like new to you, right? And so it's interesting because there's a level of acceptance that happens. If you know, like so I so these two things like kind of show up, and they just have this like really brief, short telepathic message, right? And it was like, we know you, and we won't be able to visit you later, and so we're visiting you now. Um, and it was just kind of like this feeling of like warmth and love, and then they blipped out, and I have no idea what that was. I have no idea who, where. I have no conception of like what that would necessarily be, right? Um, and so I ran into the kitchen where my mom was, and I was like, Mom, like these two things, like it was crazy. They talked to me, and like in my head, and da, da, da. And she was like, it's cool, you know, those are imaginary friends, totally normal, it's fine, you know. And I was trying to say like, no, like they were really there, you know. And she was like, no, it's fine, it's cool, you know. And so like already at that age, there was like this kind of like, I recognized that there was like some kind of schism, you know. And my mom's like one of the best my mom is a saint. My mom's incredible. So nothing against my mom in this situation. I think she was, she was a young mother. She was like handling it the best she could, right?
Yeah, I think I think a lot of parents go through. I mean, I have in my baby book, I have a thing called I don't know what this means, but I would always write down. Apparently, I would tell my mom something would happen, and I would say the robot made me do it. What the robot was, I have no idea. I don't have any memories of that. But for people who say, well, how does Jay have a memory at 4 years old? And I have a memory at 4 years old of being dropped off at the hospital for a hernia operation. Clear as day. I mean, clear as day. I remember being dropped off. So if something sticks out, something traumatic. So I'm not surprised that you remember that. What exactly did they look like?
It was almost like the best that I could describe it is kind of like the characters from like The Abyss or like Predator, like this kind of like almost water droplet, like shimmery, like not even as concrete as those effects in those movies, but
right.
like a kind of like just you could see a head and shoulders, like very skinny, kind of tall. It seemed like there was kind of like light. It almost seemed like it was composed of light and water, but you could tell that it was like on this level and on some other layer of reality somehow. I don't have any explanation for what that is or what that was, but yeah, that's the best I could describe it.
And as far as you remember, it was real. It felt real.
100%. Yeah. Like, I mean, the thing is that like, it was at such an age that, I think that one of the ways that, over the years, there is validity for me in that is that at that age, like, I don't know if this is true for you, but like what I catalog from like my early memories from when I was a child are like the total oh shit moments. Like, it's like you put your hand on the stove or you fall off of something, like you fall out of a tree, whatever it is. Like, yeah. Like those early things where it's just like, don't, your brain's just like, it flags it. Cause it's like, don't do that again. Or like this, right. Like danger, warning, whatever. And like, for whatever reason, I'm 42 years old. This is over, well over 30 years ago now. And it still is kind of like flagged in there with me, like getting bit by a goose, you know what I mean? Like stuff like that. And so like, that's part of what kind of, and I still weirdly remember it, like that fragmentary memory, like clear as day, And
it's, so they said basically we may not be able to communicate later, which right away I think, well, maybe because we're so open at that age, like you said, it's brand new to you. You don't question it. I mean, yeah, it's obviously different and you remember it, but it's not like, I had experiences when I was younger, like anomalous dreams that turned out to be true. And I'm like, at the time, I didn't think anything of it until like 10 years later. I'm like, oh, that was not everybody has those, or people do have them, but it's anomalous. So maybe that's the thinking as far as what they were saying, communicating with you then and they couldn't do it later. I mean, we're speculating.
Yeah, 100%. And like, I don't have answers. I just have really big questions, And so like, I don't know who those beings were. One seemed more masculine, one seemed more feminine, but it was such a short experience and it was so long ago that it's hard to kind of like, I kind of resist the urge to kind of like I think about it a lot, you know what I mean? Or I have over the years, but like, I'm not driven to find it. Like with that situation, it was so singular that like, I probably won't know what that was until, the day I die, or, like at best,
right.
Or something like that. You know what I mean?
And you think, did they seem familiar to you at all?
They did. Yeah. But like at that age, it's like, it's like you kind of want to be friends with everybody, right? There's like, and so like, even that, it's hard to know what that really was, And I also recognize that for a lot of people, like we're starting with a story that is already a bridge too far. And I totally recognize that. You know what I mean? Like most of the other like situations from my history, there are, often there are other people involved that can corroborate things. There are or there are things that'll be a little bit more familiar to people often, you know, within this kind of a context. And so I recognize it's coming from a weird place, but like that's part of like kind of like the inconvenient nature of anomalous experience a lot of the time. Like it gets messy, and like I think that's one of the reasons why people can be like really resistant to this kind of stuff, because they don't know how, like sometimes they don't have a context and they don't know how far down that road they can go, if that makes sense. And so sometimes bridging those gaps, I understand that it can be pretty far, but you know, at the same time, there's often this situation where it's just like you'll talk to somebody and they're like ah, yeah, nothing ever happened to me, and they're like, actually, you know, and you know, there was this one time, you know, and it's like, and like so many people, there's like, yeah, there was this one time, and it could be like, yeah, I you know, whether it was precognitive dream, whether it was whatever, and like, you know, an orb, whatever. I've heard so many different versions of there was this one time. And I think part of it is that people, our brains, you know, I mean, there are so many angles within science these days where people are starting to recognize that like our whole system is built on filtering things out that are inconvenient. You know what I mean? Like we don't see the full light spectrum. Like we don't hear as well as a dog does. You know what I mean? It's like there's so many filters set up to kind of excise whatever we don't need, you know, for survival or thriving or whatever, right? Like, you know, if we saw the full light spectrum, you know, maybe we would just be like sitting on our couch feeling like we were like tripping balls like 24/7. You know what I mean? And so in that way, like maybe that, you know, there are ways that seems like an evolutionary prerogative to keep that in line, but there are also situations where people consciously or subconsciously, you know, there's often this thing with ET experience and stuff like that where it's like they wiped my memory, and I think that there's truth to that. However, I think I've seen examples myself where people conveniently forgot things. And it seems part of that is that the brain really tries to make sense of what we see around us. It tries, like it's bent around order, right? And so like inconvenient, like anomalous, problematic situations, like it's almost as if there's like some evolutionary level where it's just like filter it out. You know what I mean?
No, I do. No, it does make sense. And it's funny because this is not exactly what you're talking about, but in my family, and sometimes I forget this, but my mom knew I was interested in this. She's gone now, but she knew I was interested in this. And one day she said, by the way, I did have this one experience where I felt this presence in the room. I was like, you're telling me this now? And I regret so much I never pushed her and got details more. I don't think there were many details where she didn't want to talk about it. But yeah, it does make sense that it could, like you said, maybe they're wiping memories, or there really is no need to wipe memory because it's such a jarring experience that we do it ourselves. So yeah, that's really interesting.
And it very well could be both, you know. It could be like it could almost be, you know, it could be overlapping, and there could be like a convenience factor for them, whoever they are, in terms of like recognizing that there is this element within us where that can sometimes happen. But that kind of brings me to like the next like major series of events in my life, if you want to go there.
Yes.
Because that element of like conveniently forgetting things like kind of plays into it. So outside of that one tiny little experience, that one like maybe like 45-second, 1 minute long experience when I was that young, like, you know, flash forward to me at about 6.5 years old. My parents moved from Fort Wayne, Indiana to Mishawaka, Indiana. Huge move, right? And like, and so, but it was, my parents were young. My dad worked for an electrical power company, and so we moved around a lot at that time because he kept getting promoted, and we'd have to move to a different like town for the company that we work for. So so there we are in Mishawaka. It was an older home built in like 1919, and it was like way bigger than the house in Fort Wayne. And I was kind of overwhelmed with it at first. And, you know, of course, like, it's like kid brain. I've gone and looked at it on Zillow, and it, you know, it doesn't seem so grand now, but it sure did at that point. You know what I mean? And
Yes.
and so I the very first night, and I think you've heard like a recording of my mom corroborating this experience. My
Yes,
mother
and
corroborating
it's
this.
so important to me to have somebody. And I wish a lot of people, I think, thought you were just going to come on here and just talk about your experiences and not have any corroborating witnesses. But your mom is so important. So yeah, definitely. When I heard that, I didn't expect that. When I was listening, I'm like, oh, this is great. I didn't know that your mom, there were other witnesses.
Yeah, and I mean, it's not just her. There's like I like friends, partners, like my current partner, exes. You know, there's a long history of that, and you may have even heard me talk about like losing a couple friends over them, kind of over them having a shared experience with me and just being too freaked out. But we can talk about that later.
Yeah.
So anyway, yeah, there's like it's kind of a deep well of shared experience with people that don't even know each other, just like through the history of my life, which is it's not totally unique. You know, that does happen, but it helps me. You know what I mean? In terms of like, even from that age with the haunted house and the kind of like, it's just so helpful when somebody else can be like, yeah, that happened. You know what I mean? Even in that moment. And especially now, it's convenient now, but at the moment, like, wow. Right. So, okay. So, we're moving into this house the very first night. Moving trucks come in, and my dad's an engineer, and so all these textbooks, all these book boxes from like his old college textbooks and stuff like this, engineering manuals, things like this, like they were used at the end of the moving truck to kind of pin in our bedding, you know, like the beds, you know, mattresses, so they don't fly around everywhere, right? So the movers used the, you know, like hand trucks to get these like massive, heavy book boxes. They put them down in the basement, right? And so they just dropped them off. So we're talking like 5-6 high, you know, pillars of these book boxes. Go to bed in the morning, wake up, and my mom is kind of freaking out in the basement, right? And the thing is that like the boxes that had been stacked in pillars like late the night before had been laid out in like a checkerboard pattern, like evenly spaced across the basement. And you know, of course, like immediately it's like, is somebody messing with us? Like, you know, that's a really weird, you know, eccentric way to mess with somebody, you know, if that were
The burglar just wanted to play a little game. And yeah, I heard you in the other interview when you guys were joking. It's like, let's break in and create a checkerboard pattern just to mess with them.
Right? What a weird way to. So like, you know, there's it went back and forth, and then later in the move-in process, you know, my mom didn't know what to think about that. But then later in the move-in process, she walks in through the back door into the kitchen, and the oven door is open, and it's like turned on blazing hot. And immediately, like, as she put it, like her brain like just like flipped over immediately. Like before that, she had no context. She had no history of ghost anything, poltergeist anything. And like there was like, as she describes it, there's kind of like a deep knowing all of a sudden where it's just like, and she like literally said out loud, like, this is my house now and you can't do this, you know? And like, she just went from like not even entertaining those ideas to being like, I have to declare that this is my place. You know what I mean? And that kind of like that, those are early experiences, but that was a very like stuff like that was a very regular occurrence there. It was, things would move around a lot. Things would kind of like, uh, uh, bowls and cups and stuff like that. I'd be like watching cartoons and something would like shove over like 18 inches, like just like right in front of me, very obviously.
What
Like
do you? What did
strange.
you? When you're sitting there, what do you do when that happens? Just oh, cool, and then just keep eating your cereal.
I mean, of course it bugged me out, but like the weirdest thing is that like, like there was the idea at that point, there was kind of like the idea that there was a ghost around, but like I hadn't seen that movie Poltergeist, right? And the thing is that most of the context as a kid for me with like ghosts and stuff like that was more like Scooby-Doo or something. You know what I mean? Like some iridescent, something that looks like a dude in a sheet or whatever. And so like part of the fear for me was not like what was happening in front of me, but that like the 4 channels on television that existed back then, like weren't really covering it. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Or they weren't in a way that I saw. So like from a cultural context, like I couldn't square it away. That's what freaked me out. Like the actual thing itself, I was like, oh, that's weird. But when you're that young, like, yeah, it's scary, but at the same time, it's like you're still learning about the world around you. You know what I mean? And so
Right.
it's like when you're super young, like, you encounter maybe snow for the first time, or like you ride a bike for the first time. There's all these like new experiences, and you're just taking it in. And so I think on one level, like maybe that's the convenience of that, like that happened so early. Maybe there's a difference there for some experiencers, where it's just like that since it happened so early, it stops getting filtered out, or like there's some kind of, the filter's wider. I don't know. I don't know why.
Did you have
But there,
discussions? Did you have discussions with your parents about it at the time?
yeah. I mean, a bit with my mom. Like they had bigger issues though at the time. Like they got divorced in that house. Um, you know, um, they were having marital problems at the time, and so, and they were young parents, and there's me, and there's like my 18-month-old sister. And so I think that amazingly, weirdly, like the poltergeist phenomenon in the house was probably like maybe number 5 or number 6 on their list of issues for like what they felt like they were juggling at that particular moment, which is wild to to consider.
Yeah.
But that's how life is. I think one thing, it's funny sometimes when I hear when I read accounts, and then I read almost like critical or skeptical rebuttals of things, and people are like, why don't you know exactly the day that happened, or why don't, and it's like a lot of times, like these are situations that people don't recognize, that a lot of times people want to forget these things. They don't, it's not like you don't walk into a situation like that and automatically become like a cataloging enthusiast of like these like weird, sometimes scary, sometimes traumatic events. You know what I mean? And so,
No, exactly. Because like I said, my experiences I had with, I had a couple of precognitive dreams when I was in like 8th or 9th grade. I didn't write them down. If you ask me, I even have trouble remembering exactly when it happened. I dreamt that this girl I had a crush on, that her mom died, and next day I go in and she was out. And the day after she comes in, she goes, "We're like, why were you out?" She's like, "My mom died." But at the time, I didn't think, "Oh my God, I can't believe I dreamed that." I didn't think of that, and I didn't write it down or anything. But years later, I'm like, that really wasn't normal. So yeah, I
100%.
understand.
Yeah. And my dad, like, and like, basically, this is again when I'm pretty young, and so I think I have a lot more clarity about experiences that happened more recently. And so this like these memories from that age are relatively fragmentary, and like I don't want to kind of like add too much window dressing to like what I can remember from fragmentary experience. But like my father was troubled, but he was not willing to really entertain like he was like, I mean, I think my dad was going through a lot at the time. He was kind of like losing his grip on like the family dynamic, like the marriage was falling apart, stuff like that. So like, and he was also, an electrical engineer, and he was not like a very, um, out there kind of guy. And so I I have a memory of him like trying to blame some of this stuff as being like an electrical problem in the house, and that he was going to figure it out because he's an engineer, right? And it never getting figured out, right? But that's kind of, at that time, that was as far as he was willing to go. Much later, like when I was in my early 30s, it was just him and me hanging out one night, and and it was one of those, and it was just like a brief thing, but he kind of turned to me and was like, like I was wrong to not, I was wrong to deny the stuff that was happening there. Like I should have listened more. I should have like, and he didn't go into a lot of detail, and it was just like a couple sentences, and that was the most that I ever got it out of him about it to this day. My mom's much more willing to as you know, to kind of talk about it. But it wasn't, it was that there was also like weird shadows would appear in the house sometimes, like along the walls that were like what people might term as like shadow beings or something like that. These like strange kind of like kind of disturbingly like elongated forms that would just kind of like race along the wall. And
your mom saw those?
I'm not sure if my mom saw those, but I like, you'd have to ask her. I did, one thing that my mom like filtered out, and then she recalled even just in the last couple of years. I was like, Mom, but like you remember things moving around more on the tables and stuff. And she was like, not a lot. And I was like, this is something that happened like every week around, like it seemed like it happened, every week around me. And she was like, actually, you know what? I don't know why I didn't remember this before, but yeah, I remember like notable times where I'd reach for the car keys and they would shoot across the table, like out of my grasp, like as I was reaching for them. And she was like, why didn't I remember that? Like, what was that about? You know what I mean? And so, yeah. So, I mean, she allows that there are probably things that like she didn't want to be kind of, or like on some level, maybe subconsciously, where some of the stuff would escape, and some of it might even come back later. You know what I mean? But
Jay, I'm going to interrupt you for a question because it's relevant,
sure.
because it is really impressive. How do you remain so grounded? That's what impresses me about you. When I first had when Sean and I were on the other day.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Thank you,
And
Sean.
I appreciate that, Sean. Thanks. Like this wasn't always the case. Like, to be completely honest with you, like this has been a long process. I'm 42 years old. Even like 5 years ago, like I had a really hard time engaging with these topics, and like even just seeing like ufology related programming on TV would kind of like I would avoid it, flip right through it. Like it was like I had a time in my 20s when like I was kind of at the height of regular experience, and there's a time during that phase where I was researching as much as I could, and then I went through a period of a lot of years where like I tried to shut it off any way that I could. And so like each of those stages through my 20s and 30s where I was trying to engage with it and I was trying to pull away from it, neither worked at the time, you know, like, and it became a process of honestly, I think like the biggest thing for me was meditation, actually. Like I started meditating about 5.5, 6 years ago or so. And being able to kind of like just kind of zero out my brain in the morning and or at night, it really did a lot for me in
Any
terms of being
specific type of meditation?
well, a couple, but like, I mean, the thing that really like worked at first is really the zeroing out, like the Zen, like kind of my own version of like Zen meditation, where it's just like you really just kind of like focus on your breath and don't envision anything, like not even necessarily a mantra, just anytime like a thought starts to kind of bubble up, we just kind of like try to acknowledge that it happened and get it to go away and kind of like get back to zero. That was like, I mean, I've done other forms of meditation, but that was really helpful in terms of like really my sanity, to be honest with you. And being able to start to process things on a different way. That, and you know, like over the course of the last couple of years, I mean, I wouldn't be able to be here with you right now. Even 2 years ago, this would have been like absolutely impossible for me to do. Even a year ago, this would have been impossible for me to do, I think.
When did you first go public telling your story?
Friday.
So that was with,
yeah. And so like literally, like, I mean, you know, I co-founded the Experiencer group with Stuart Davis and Kirsten Blackburn, and part of the structure there is that like experiencers can get together in a private situation, a private member site. They can compare notes, they can talk, like, you know, whatever, and it can be private. And part of the motivation there is that like literally I needed that. Like I think a lot of experiencers needed that, and it didn't exist. And like, you know, like I needed that in my 20s, and it didn't happen. And like eventually took a long time, but I figured like, okay, well, I get it. Like if we're going to be the people to do it, then we're going to be the people to do it. And it's not like the only anonymous or quiet or private experiencer group, but it's, you know, there's a lot on that site that people are finding helpful, and I appreciate that. But like, if it wasn't also for working with other experiencers and support groups and things like that, I wouldn't be able to be as grounded, and I wouldn't be able to talk about it like I am with you right now. And because partially like being able to corroborate things with like your loved ones is one thing, but like when you're able to corroborate like weird details about some of this stuff with somebody that lives on the other side of the world, you know, like that's really special. And like, right. And you're like, holy shit, like, you know what I mean? Like really obscure details, like, you know, like tools or like strength, or like the kind of like clothing something like a being might wear or whatever, you know. There's all sorts of situations like this where it's just like, oh wow. And so, you know, it's partially through that as well that I started to realize that I could be that it was needed to have people that could do this. And again, it turned into a situation where it's like, why aren't more, you know, like I know from behind the scenes, there are like, you know, people that run like huge companies that are experiencers. You know, there are like a lot, there are really high functioning, brilliant people, you know, that are in this situation. And
that is, yeah,
you know,
and that's so important. I mean, we've heard it through Bud Hopkins and John Mack and David Jacobs, but they will never name them, obviously. It would be huge if one of those, whether it's a scientist, You know, somebody like you just said who runs a big company, it would be so important for that to happen. Hopefully one day it will.
Yeah. And so, you know, and so again, it turned into a thing where it's like, I mean, we're kind of, I don't want to put the cart before the horse, but you know, like that's why, you know, I when Ralph asked me to do this, if I was up for doing this, I mean, I didn't feel like forced into it or anything like that. It was just kind of a like, hey, you know, he threw it out there, and it's like, you know, Ralph Blumenthal, you know, like the guy, you know, the guy that was Leslie and Helene, like broke the ATIP story, you know, like that guy, you know, the Pulitzer Prize winning, like, you know, bureau chief of the New York Times wants to do it. And of course the article was going to be for the Times. And I was like, you know, if I'm ever going to do this, I mean, if I'm ever going to come out as an experiencer of abductions of non-human entities, like this is exactly the context to do it. Like like John Max Gone. There's like there are only a few people that it's like that could amplify and help and kind of contextualize things as well as somebody like Ralph could.
Yeah, I had no idea until you brought it up the other day how close it was to being in the New York Times. And yeah, I mean, we could talk about it now and get back to your experiences. I mean, how was when you found out that it was, I mean, were you ever told that it was basically a done deal and you were just waiting, or was it still, was Ralph always saying, you know, it's not done until it's not over till it's over? Because I know it got pulled pretty close to the publication date, which is just so disappointing to me.
Yeah, the first time like it was originally and Ralph was always careful to kind of be like, you know, like things could change at the last minute, but you know, and so and you know, he's a very seasoned reporter. He worked for the New York Times like as a daily reporter and bureau chief for 45 years. So that kind of conditional language, but he was very he seemed pretty confident about the whole thing, and like, you know, I wouldn't, you know, like private emails and stuff like that, I wouldn't want to quote, but like, you know, it really looked like it was going to run in the Sunday edition of the New York Times on the 4th of July. And like a big article, like, and you know, and it was actually kind of bigger than it actually ran in the debrief, because like the New York Times, they did photos with everybody. Like I had a photographer from the Times, like here, you know, like for a day, like here and like nearby in my neighborhood and things like that. And and there was one other experiencer that was involved earlier and dropped out because she, like, after the New York Times situation, you know, in terms of them like not wanting to run it, you know, I think that there was like I don't want to speculate about why she
Right.
changed her mind, but so you know, like the way that it was kind of like that Ralph was really intending it, it was like, wow, this could really shift the dialogue. This could really change the conversation, and like we're still having a conversation, which I deeply value. Like I'm so glad that the Debrief published it. I'm glad that Tim jumped on it. I'm glad that this is happening. And I'm also appreciative that part of the conversation is that the Times wouldn't run it. And that like, and more specifically that like, there's still this underdog status and there's still the stigma, and like, it's time to contextualize this stuff. It's time to stop acting like they just stare at the tops of our houses and fly away or whatever. Like
you brought that up. Yeah, you brought it up the other day, and it was really funny. You're like, "What do people think they're doing?" And I have this discussion all the time. It's like, why would you not think about abductions, experiencers, when you know, if you believe there are people in this community who believe that UFOs are here, we don't know what they are. Obviously, the next logical step is, what are they doing? And you're like, well, they're not shingling houses, you know, they're not here to like renovate houses in the middle of the night, and you wake up like, oh, who did that? then again, they are taking your boxes and putting them into a checkerboard pattern. So who the hell knows?
Or somebody is, yeah.
Somebody is, yeah, it could be totally
yeah.
different than what, you know, the
Yeah.
two phenomena.
So,
but Ralph, you know, so how long was that in the process from the beginning until the 4th of July? And do you know how did he choose? Do you have any idea how they chose who to put in the article? Like, how did he find people?
well, okay, so Ralph started talking to people, talking to specific experiencers it was like near the beginning of April. All right, so this has been kind of like a long, and like he was already working on the article. You know, he had and I think part of the impetus of that is that he wrote this biography, The Believer, a biography on John Mack that came out in March. And so I think that he was kind of like very much in that headspace of like he had access to John Mack's archive, like of experiencer cases and things like that. And he'd been working with that for 16 years. 16 years he'd been working on that. And so and that's how it, like, as I mentioned the other day, that's how he and Leslie Kean got together initially, because Leslie Kean was Bud Hopkins' companion for a number of years until Bud died. And so, they she had reported for the Boston Globe, he had reported for the New York Times, and they got together over, literally abduction experiencer cases. That was like part of a huge part of them initially coming together. And people don't recognize that. And of course, and it makes sense that would be something that you would kind of be quiet about, because, because of this slow, methodical, thoughtful way that they have tried to get some of these stories out and legitimized and acknowledged by our government and other folks and things like that. So I get it, you know what I mean? But it's an important wrinkle. It's for people to know in a contextual framework. And I'm glad that Ralph is able to be more open about that now than they may have been a few years ago.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, no, definitely. Leslie's very careful. I mean, she said it. She goes, "We're very careful about what we try to get printed in the New York Times and other media. We just want to stick to what we know." So, I mean, she also does work, though. She does work on, survival of consciousness and physical mediums, which I love physical mediumship. So I was so happy when I saw her working on that and reincarnation. But how did you find out? How did you find out the article was killed?
Okay. Okay. So how was it killed? So it was challenging there. So the 4th of July. So I think we were all really, really psyched. We were the folks from that were featured in the article, Nadine, Robin, Lassiter, Stuart Davis, as mentioned in there, and Karen Austin, and we were all, Ralph had kind of blasted out and then it was not even 72 hours before it, it was slated to run, and he was and he alerted us that he wasn't hearing back from whoever, whatever contact person would normally be getting back to him. So he knew that there was an issue, and he was like, "It doesn't look like it's happening this week. I don't know why. I'm looking for answers." And I probably should, I don't want to go, I don't want to quote from private emails or something like that. But there was this, after that point, there was a couple weeks where it was okay, it looks like it's probably, a couple weeks later it's okay, it seems like it's going to run now. And then it didn't happen. And then he was obviously having long form conversations with people. And then a few weeks, by the beginning of August, you know, he was like, look, I'm gonna have to start looking at other places. Like it was, you know, I always knew that this was going to be, you know, like challenging, but like but you know, from his perspective and from what I've heard, you know, there was an editorial changeover this summer at the Times, and some of the people, and I don't know why, but a couple of the people that were particularly there were longstanding associates of Ralph's work and really liked this particular, you know, the ATIP, like that whole like body of stories. They left, and like a couple other people got traded out and like traded in, and he says that like a couple of new people were much more skeptical, and for whatever reason, and it's, you know, and like I don't know who those people are, and like I don't know their motivations, and I wouldn't want to speculate about that, but it's, you know, it's unfortunate that such big questions, huge questions, you know, like isn't it like, are there other, you know, advanced intelligences like around us? So like where do they come from? Like who are how much are they interacting with people? Like how can they contact us telepathically? Like how do they communicate with us like that? What's this consciousness connection? These are like some of the biggest questions that, and in my mind anyway, and this is obviously because of my history and things like this, but like these are some of the biggest questions you could ask. And just the idea that like a couple of people could be like, yeah, I'm skeptical of that. It's like, how, like, you're skeptical of like, you know, like, I mean, like what you're saying with Leslie's work, it's like, what's her other big thread? Like the survival of consciousness, right? And it's like, these are some of the biggest questions that you can contend with. And I recognize that it involves risk, and it involves like some of the scariest issues that people could think about, like mortality, and like whether something else is like smarter or more advanced, or, you know, has some kind of advantage or whatever, you know, like if you're not the top of the food chain, or however you want to frame it, you know, like people tend to contextualize things that way, or be like, you know, threat narratives, all that kind of stuff. And so like I get why people would want to avoid these topics sometimes, but at the same time, it doesn't mean that it's not, it like, we know that it's real. You know what I mean? Like we know that UFOs exist. We have those cockpit videos. We have had things acknowledged. We, you know, and like, you know, I'm preaching to the choir here, like with you, Joe, but like, you know, we like, you know, you go down this road and it becomes frustrating when these kind of roadblocks come up. But you know, I'm just happy that we're here now in 2021 with it, and like, and there are dams that are breaking, there are stories that are getting through there, we are making progress. And you know, the old like Project Blue Book playbook of like denial and swamp gas and all that stuff, like that, those days are over, thank God. But like, you know, like it's like we're at a position where we should be able to take on these contentious issues, these challenging questions, you know. And when some people say like, oh, you know, like it's not the right time, like we're dealing with cockpit videos, like experiencer stuff, like we need to be dealing with that further down the road. It's like I was reading that stuff like when we posted Ralph, you know, on Twitter, being frustrated about the, you know, going public with us about the Times like rejecting the piece, right? Choosing not to run the piece. And you know, like I saw some, you know, like I tried to put my blinders on and like only go so far down the road of like how much skepticism I wanted to entertain in terms of like what I was reading. But you know, some people were like, oh, it's not the right time, as if like as if anybody in this field like has some like secret stew recipe that the rest of us don't know, when it's like the right time to sprinkle in the experiencers or something like that, right?
It's April 19th, 2024. Jay, I figured it out. That is the right time.
Right. And it's like, and it's super ironic too, because it was like literally the same, the week that was the 60th anniversary of Betty and Barney Hill's encounter. And it's like, that was okay. Try telling Betty, like, that was 60 years ago. All right. And if it's like 60 years later than that, and it's still too early, like, and it's like, I don't know if, you know what I mean? It's like, I don't like, I'm being sarcastic here, but it's like, I don't know, you guys, have you looked outside? Like, I don't know how much time we have left, you know what I mean? Sometimes. And it's just like, if it's like, you know, you could make a case that it's too late rather than too early if you want to go down that road. You know what 100%. I mean? Like,
yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, I've definitely thought about that, and I go back and forth. I'm like, how long are we gonna have to wait? I think we're getting there, but I mean, I don't know. I don't know if we're going to get that media coverage I think that we're looking for. I think we will. I think we're heading in that right direction, but it's almost part of me is disappointed, not disappointed. But part of me is like, maybe I shouldn't even known about the New York Times article, because now it's like we were so close, and I'm not even an experiencer. I can't imagine you guys. I mean, you guys, you know, you were bringing Brett along, and then, I mean, obviously he told you it wasn't a done deal, but it's, you know, it's got to be disheartening. And
well,
you know,
yeah, I mean, you know, to be very frank, like there was definitely I was on a Zoom earlier today. We recorded a session with everybody that was featured that Ralph talked to in that article, and we'll post it soon. It was a really productive, deep, thoughtful conversation. We'd never all gotten together like that. And so, you know, me, Stuart Davis, Robin Lassiter, Nadine Lalich, Karen Austin, and it was great. It was super. It was, but like, you know, there was one thing that came up is, you know, Karen and Nadine like have acknowledged their ET experience in public before. All right. And Robin and I hadn't, and Stuart had. So we you know, we kind of compared notes that way. And one thing that came up was just like, you know, that like this whole like will they or won't they thing, and like trying to remove it from like feeling some sense of like validation, you know what I mean? And it's just like, and it was difficult. It was challenging. There was a lot of and I, you know, I'd be absolutely 100% lying if I told you that like I wasn't like, you know, that like I had days where I was just like really, you know, upset, like about the idea that like, you know, working on something, having all the interviews with Ralph working on it, seeing drafts of it, and being like, and even like the symbolism of the 4th of July and the Sunday, you know what I mean? The whole thing is just like, it just this like gleaming, like amazing situation, and like having the rug pulled out like that. And it's just like, you know, and like, are we just going to be like rejected, like unacknowledged underdogs forever? You know what I mean? And it's like one of the most annoying things is that like this whole field exists, like, and like, I don't think this is like an exaggeration. It's, we know about, you know, ufology exists, like anomalous studies, all this stuff. It exists because the people that experience these things talked about it.
Right.
Okay. You know what I mean? What, you know, whether we're talking about like a Navy pilot, whether we're talking David Fravor, whether we're talking Whitley Strieber, Betty Barney Hill, you know, like whatever ancient, you know, like accounts someone might hear about, you know, like the whole thing exists because like people were like, you know, they saw something and they said something, you know what I mean, about it. And so like when people are completely decentralized from that conversation, it's like it's incredibly frustrating, and like it's insulting actually, because it's like you know, like where did all your stories come from? Where did all your favorite accounts come from? They came out because somebody talked about them.
Right.
And so so, you know, like, and even if you don't believe somebody, like, you know, there's still the tradition and the history of that, and also just the respect of like fellow human beings.
No,
anyway.
I can't imagine. I'm, like I said, I'm not an experiencer, and I would have been devastated. I know how I was last year. Last year, I had, you know, people telling me specifics about the New York Times article on crash retrievals. So, and I heard it was going to be substantial, and then it came out, and I'm reading the article, and it was like, I was like, wait, no, where's the article? No, really, this is not the article. You know, I was so disappointed. Then I realized there was some really good stuff in there, but later on we learned that the good editors, the ones who are gone now, they just cut out a lot. So I can only imagine how you guys felt. But yes, thanks for sharing that all. And I definitely want to move on to I think your next experience, is it the one up the stairs with the slats?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, all right. So, so after that house, you know, and you know, a lot of people connect poltergeist phenomena with like so-called ET experience and things like that. And like, I don't have any answers about that. I don't know.
Let me read the one thing I told you about. So Eric Davis, who's done a lot of work in this field, Dr. Eric Davis, an astrophysicist, he said on Coast to Coast a few years ago, and I didn't know this, and I need to get clarification from him, but he said, quote, poltergeist phenomenon is always attached to UFO encounters. It's something that's not very well understood or recognized by many in ufology. Every time you have UFOs, you're going to have poltergeists associated with them. So yeah, I did not know that, and I need to get clarification, because there are people who have had encounters who said, I don't have poltergeist activity. So, but yeah. Continue. Sorry.
So yeah, no, not at all. I think that's great context. And like, I mean, I like if I go overboard in this realm, I just want to keep underlining the part where it's just like, I am like, if somebody wants the answers, they're not going to find them with me. You know what I mean? Like, again, like, I've got big questions, I don't have the answers. And so like, I think that's an important thing to set up, like from the outset. But
thank you, Cheryl. We're getting there right now. Jay has some more to share.
All right. Thanks, Jarrell. So, I was about 9 or 10 years old and living in a different town in Indiana. My mom, like, they got divorced. My mom remarried. And we were living in a college town in southern Indiana. And I had my first kind of classic abduction experience. I was in my bedroom, which was in kind of like a partially finished basement in Hanover, Indiana, and I was sitting like half. I was on my bed, and do you remember those old husband pillows? Those goofy pillows with the arms that were like popular in the like late 70s.
I was looking them up today. Yes, they're called, I think, armrests. Yes, they're like half of a recliner. Or
yeah. And so like I had one of those things. They're often corduroy. Mine was anyway, as I recall. And so I was kind of like half reclined on my bed, and I had fallen asleep like that, which was rare, right? And I think that might have been part of the reason why I have this memory at all, or why I saw what I did. And so like I wake up, and there are two gray like beings like just past the foot of my bed. Like there's one kind of like past the left end of the bed and one past the right. And the one like to my left was holding this like kind of like a chrome rod that was maybe like 16, 18 inches long or something like that. Like this little thin, like about like maybe it was the width of like my ring finger or something like that. And the other one to the right started moving towards me. All right. And like the thing was is like when I first woke up and saw this, I was just like, what? Like what is happening? But for whatever reason, like my first response was not fear. My first response was like wonder. But then the being on the right started moving towards me without kind of like saying anything or acknowledging anything or any kind of warmth or anything. It just started moving towards me, and this kind of like almost marionette like movement. And it was that movement that like it didn't walk like us, right? This kind of marionette movement was like, I was like deeply scared, like instantaneously, and seeing that. And as it started moving towards me, the other one like raised its arm with this rod, and like I blacked out or passed out or however you want to, you know what I mean? It's just like,
And that rod is, I've heard that rod before. Have you, or is that a common aspect of abductions?
I like, since, I've heard other accounts, since I'm like a student of this stuff, and I'd heard a couple times about something like that, but Ralph actually, Ralph actually helped corroborate that and said that was something that like in going through John's records that kept coming up. And so in Ralph talking to me, like that was something that that kind of pinged for him when he heard about the rod. He was like, oh, and so, I heard about that later, but so apparently, John had kind of like a list or something like this of John Mack had a list of like, these kind of like weird random details that kept popping up. But I didn't, I didn't know that until this year, but anyway, so so like the rod comes up, I black out. All right. And I'm not sure if it was within the next period of days. I don't know if it was a couple days later or like a week later or 2 weeks later. Again, this is like 30 years ago, over 30 years ago that this happened. Right. But I was again, this unfinished basement. I was walking up the basement steps, and they were like slat steps, just like wood slat steps. And I could see through like the slats to the laundry room behind the steps going up to the kitchen. And super weird detail. Like I'm going up the steps, I see movement in the laundry room, and I look in, and one of those same types of beings, I don't know if it was the same one as one of those two, but there's a being. It was crouched in front of the washing machine, and it was like going through like a pile of dirty clothes that were sitting in front of the washing machine. And it was just, I just like booked it up the steps, right? And then after that, like every time I went up and down those steps, I ran up and down those steps as fast as I could, with child brain, you know what I mean? Just the association of like having seen that, like partially, I think because like partly the fear was like it's back, but also that it corroborated that earlier experience. You know what I mean? Because I had been wondering about it, and then just being like the idea that would be that, like that wasn't just a one-time only occurrence, was deeply freaky, right?
It's like if you're gonna make up, people are like, he's making up a story. And like, if you're gonna make up a story, you're not gonna make up a story about aliens obsessed with dirty laundry. It's the weirdest thing.
Yeah, it's bizarre, and like I don't know, and like I have no idea. Was there some you know, like I can speculate, like what was that? Did they accidentally leave some piece of evidence and like somebody had to go retrieve it? I have
They
no
left
idea.
the rod. One of the rods was in the pocket, and they were
they're like
looking for it. Where did you leave the rod?
Yeah.
Ugh.
Yeah. I mean, I'm just I'm amazed. Like just thinking about like that argument, you know, they get up there and they're like, seriously, again with the rod? Like, we're not going to give you a rod anymore. That's what you're going to do. You know,
well, you hear stories that they put, you know, they make mistakes, like they put people back in the wrong spot and the wrong clothes. The clothes are run backwards, so they're not beyond making mistakes or things like that. But maybe there was some obsession with the clothing. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and there is like a weird thing where it's like the short grays anyway. The tall grays are smarter. The shorter grays, like they're really like one of the weirdest things is like totally with what you're saying is that like they don't seem to be. They seem to have like kind of like logic trees that it's like this is what you're supposed to be doing, like, you know, kind of like a job description. And it's like when things deviate from like the norm for them, they get totally thrown off. Like, you know what I mean? Like these these short, they are not gifted improvisers. You know what I mean? Like there's like for whatever reason, and I think that partially plays into why some people are like, are they drones? Are they AI or what? Because
I was thinking
because like there's this kind of like does not compute angle that comes into play when if you like, and it's one strategy that some experiencers talk about like privately is like, you know, if you're in a situation, like one way to defuse or shift like one of these things is like, you know, it would be if you're conscious to do something that doesn't make any sense, basically, or like kind of reroute into something that they just wouldn't anticipate. And like it's like it would be an amazingly hard thing to do in the moment, but it's but it's those kinds of situations when people do end up sometimes with, at the very least, like more of kind of a corroboratory element, like, you know, waking up in their clothes or you know, like something being out of place or misaligned or things like that. Yeah. Anyway.
I appreciate that. And did you tell your parents about that one?
I did not tell my parent. I told my mom that I'd seen like a weird being, but I didn't go into a lot of detail. And I think even in trying to tell it to her, like I was kind of trying to play it off. And I can't remember exactly how that conversation went down, but it did not happen immediately. And like, it was definitely not like we've got aliens in the house or something like that. Like that was not it. Like I do remember an element of reportage, but like it came later while we still lived in that house. Like, I saw something I think I said something like I saw something weird in the laundry room, but you know, it didn't. And my mom is able to recall that happened, but you know, I think, you know, like again, like the context, it's like it's a 10-year-old kid telling his mom that they saw something weird in the laundry room. Like, you know, there's a very kind of practical context of that from her perspective, probably, where it's like, you know, kids are creative or they think they see something, or, you know, the imaginative mindset of a child. And I totally get that. You know what I mean? So I don't like, you know, later on down the line, she was like, there was an element where, you know, the sentiment was like, I'm sorry I didn't latch onto that. And I was like, well, why would you? How, I get it. It doesn't, you know, and this is also in like the late 80s, and it hadn't kind of like, those kinds of stories hadn't reached the fever pitch or in terms of like, you know, rural Indiana that they would even 5 or 10 years later with things like the X-Files or whatever, you know what I mean? Like, and so were there
books out yet at that point at all?
I mean, like, you know,
And at
like
your age, obviously, you're not gonna. You're
yeah,
not gonna
I mean,
think to think about books about it.
yeah, I mean, Communion came out in, I mean, I think Communion came out in 87, the book,
87.
and so this would have been like, you know, this would have been like, I think this would have been like 88, maybe, or 87 itself. Because if I was 9 or 10, I was born in 1978. So, you know, it was like right around there when this would have happened. But of course, I wouldn't have I don't like, we certainly didn't have that book in the house. Like, I don't remember having any awareness of him at that time. You know, like my TV watching was pretty limited to like Saturday morning cartoons and like, you know, stuff like that at that point. So I like, you know, had I ever seen like, I don't think that I'd seen Close Encounters at that point. Like maybe I'd seen a depiction of something like that,
Right.
but I don't know. And it certainly didn't look exactly like the beings that I saw. You know what I mean? Like, so, you know, there's always that kind of chicken and the egg problem where people are going to be like, well, you probably saw something like that in popular culture. And at that moment, it was like really kind of like right on the line. You know what I mean? So,
Right.
yeah.
So, what was your next experience?
Okay. So, so after that, like, I was at my grandparents' house in Ohio, and I was upstairs, and my mom and my stepdad and my grandparents and one of my aunts, I can't remember which one, were in the living room and they were talking like after dinner or something like that. And I was upstairs like playing with toys. And this is a really, again, like a really weird situation. I saw like there were two like spare bedrooms. One like used to be my mom's bedroom and one used to be my aunt's bedroom. And there's like a hallway. And so I was in the one room and there's like the stairs and then there's this other room. And so I was positioned in such a way that I could see into the other room. I look into the other room and like this weird portal opens up in the other room. And this strange, like tallish being that had kind of like a fuzzed out face comes through this portal and like it comes like straight for me. I don't know, like my first guess would be that it was a tall gray, but I'm not sure. Fuzzed out face. I don't know what was up with the fuzzed out face. It was almost as if there was like digital distortion as like some kind of masking technology over the face. I don't know how or why. But it was like this weird.
Besides besides the face, was everything else black? Because I think, because I know black, and in my mind I start thinking, well, maybe it was something that was being rendered in the face. You know, all the black was easily rendered, but the face was not rendered, so it was just kind of like incomplete. Total speculation.
Yeah, that's possible. I mean, it's possible that there was some kind of like, you know, holistic masking like technology or something like that employed. Like, I'm not sure. Yeah, you know, like whatever it was something that was able to employ like some kind of portaling device. So it you know, clearly something that's like, so, you know, as science fiction writers and people often quote, you know, like sufficiently advanced technology will appear as if it was magic, right? And like clearly portal technology would fit into that kind of a framework. So whatever it was. So it comes out of this like weird portal, starts kind of tearing right for me. I run for the stairs. I get down about half the stairs, and then there was like a weird time dilation effect. Like it felt like everything started to slow down. And it felt like I was like moving through molasses somehow. Like I'd been running like full tilt down the stairs to try to get to like my family in the living room, right? And all of a sudden it was just like, and and then things were very slow, and it was almost as if I was kind of like inert. And like my last memory from that is being taken out the front door that was right next to this living room and looking into the living room, and my family that were all sitting there having a conversation in the living room. It was all, as if they had all been like turned off. Like I looked in there and a couple of my family members like had their heads back, like in the chairs that they were in. And a couple of them were like that. It was as if they were all rendered unconscious, which was like even more disturbing than the being itself. So you know, that would be the next memory that I remember. The next after that was,
let me just stop you 1 second, Jay. So what did the portal look like specifically, as much as you can remember?
Sure. Yeah, like that was it was actually kind of like oblong, and as I recall, and again, this is like 30 years ago, but like I like the edges of it were not clearly defined. They were kind of fuzzy, and I remember just darkness, and it seemed like there was depth through it, but I don't really remember the elements that were through it, if that makes sense. And yeah, and I also remember that it didn't reach the floor. So like, and like it was maybe like 6 or 8 feet into that room, and I would say that it was like maybe 6.5 feet tall. I mean, maybe 6 feet tall, or something like that, and maybe like 6 inches like off the floor, and maybe 3 feet wide or something like that. But again, kind of like an elongated egg shape, almost kind of like that, fuzzy edges.
I have in my family, I have a cousin who had it was her and her husband, and all of a sudden this, I guess it was like about this far, it just came out from the ceiling down like that, and then a being stuck its arm out, and in her head, with her husband in her head, she just said, "I don't want to see this," and it stuck its arm back in and then just disappeared. Then we have Skinwalker Ranch, where they apparently saw a portal open, and you want to get even more controversial, it was a Bigfoot-like creature that came out of it. Skinwalker also had poltergeist activity, so it's like, and we've talked about, and I heard you talk about how this might all be connected, which we can talk about later.
Sure.
But moving on, and it took you out the front door is another odd detail. It's like, did they turn off the whole neighborhood?
Why would super weird. Well, and at the same time, like I had this weird sense as it was as if time had slowed down, and like, you know, again, it gets into that thing where it's just like, is that just completely subjective? Was that some kind of like sorry for the sirens, New Jersey, but like some kind of like was that some kind of like, you know, like the wand, like the rod? Was this some kind of like thing that was like, they were just making me drowsy? Is that why time seemed slow? But like something along those lines, like it seemed to be kind of like tied into why it wouldn't be like why walking out the front door maybe wouldn't be a problem. And I don't know. And like, maybe it's also possible that it's just like a very superior form of surveillance, where it's just like they really just mapped it out and they can see all 80 people that would have been on that block, and none of them were looking at the time. Or I don't, you know, I have no idea, you know. So did you want to go on to like the next event, or like
if anybody has any questions up until this point, I was going to go at the end, but I don't see anything jumping out, and the reason the super chat ones jump out is because I'm blind and I need to get glasses. But yeah, we could just quickly you know, I know you've thought about it and I've thought about it, and I don't know if it's the answer that all of this is connected. And I know there are people that insist it's all the same thing. It's one phenomenon. And I'm not so sure. I don't know. I mean, I'm not so sure about any of this, but I know you have thoughts. I'm open to it, but I don't know.
I definitely have a lot of, I've thought about it a lot. And, you know, I think there's a possibility that we live in a very rich, diverse cosmos, you know, and that there are possibly a lot of different types of life that we just haven't quite acknowledged, you know. I mean, and there's often this kind of like there's often this gap where it takes a while for something to get on the record, and maybe it's just like, you know, it's detection, it's like how much evidence do you have, you know what I mean, like you know, people forget that like great apes were like a mythological creature until like a ridiculously late year, you know what I mean, like there
Yeah,
are a
same thing with
lot.
the great panda, the same thing.
Yeah. And so, you know, and it's just, and why was that? You know, like partially because like, you know, like probably a bunch of, you know, European people, scientists at that time hadn't run into one yet. You know what I mean? And
Yep.
so like it was lore. And so, you know, and as our technology is increasing to the point of like being able to like have advanced forms of detection and like being able to kind of like, you know, like see, you know, more of the light spectrum, see, you know, like radiation or you know, gravitational waves, or like however you frame it. I'm not a scientist, but you know, like the RF spectrum, like all this stuff, you know, like we're expanding our abilities in terms of like what we can see or sense. And but science in some ways doesn't seem like it's caught up with like what are some of our subtle senses, like what are our subtle abilities to like that like our, you know, years and years and years of evolutionary development like has gifted us with the ability to sense danger, you know what I mean, like if we can sense any, like it seems like we have an extraordinary capability of detection when it comes to like a problematic situation or something like that, and it seems
Right.
to kind of like maybe trigger something where all of a sudden like some of these other things that are usually filtered out like can come into play or something like that, if that makes sense.
No, it does. And I don't know if if this one experience you had, you skipped over or it's later, but you talked about, I listened where you talked about seeing another boy playing with your toys.
Mm-hmm.
And it just made me think of exactly what you're talking about. There's another world that's right beyond our ability to sense in the electromagnetic spectrum. And sometimes the worlds cross over. And it's
Mm-hmm.
really, it's like, you know, it's a really interesting story. I mean, tell the story about, I don't know how old you were when you saw that.
Sure. Yeah, that's back in that haunted house in Mishawaka, and like haunted house. Like I kind of like playfully term it like that, but you know, it was, right? So like, so I was in my bedroom, and like I woke up one night late, and my like a couple of my like toy cars or something were out on the floor, right? And like and I already knew that that was like not right because like I had cleaned them up. I like, and so, and then I look, and then there's like an apparition of a boy, um, that was about my age, and it was like he was pushing the cars across. So like, he was kind of like, you know, like not, I could kind of see through him, but like he definitely had like details and stuff like this, and it was like a kid, right? And like, um,
How old
and
were
like
you?
I was about 6, and he looked to be about 6, okay, um, and there's and like the car moves across the floor, like he's like touching it, and like the car, like the little toy car, like a little Hot Wheels or whatever, like, and I look at him, and then he senses me and looks up, and and we make eye contact, right? And like, and he starts, and he opens his mouth, and it's almost like it was totally unintelligible. It was almost it's almost like an AM radio station that was just out of phase. And so it just like sounded like weird static almost. Like I couldn't. He was clearly trying to speak to me, but like it wasn't telepathy. It was like it was the way that I heard it, the way that I perceived it was almost like a really disturbing kind of static, or like out of phase radio station.
Out of phase.
Like,
That's exactly what I'm thinking. Something just out of phase.
Yeah.
You know what it makes me think of, Jay? It makes me think of the movie The Others.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And like, and like again, like a lot of this comes into speculation, but it really does seem it like from all these situations, like the portaling, and like it's hard not to draw connections, and some of these definitely seem like different classes of beings or different types of entities or intelligences. But at the same time, a lot of it still points to the possibility that, or maybe the probability that there are these other kind of like almost like different radio stations that are just adjacent to us that have like a whole ecosystem on them or something like that. And like I don't understand it. Like I have no idea like how or why, but like it seems as if like from what I hear from like the bit of research I've done, it sounds like it's theoretically possible. Like I'm not an expert in that kind of a field, but like there are these strange situations where like either a person seems to be targeted and kind of placed almost out of phase with our normal day-to-day reality, or people see something where that kind of where there, it's almost as if like there's like I've thought about this before, and like again, this is total speculation. I have no idea, but like it seems like maybe that's the case, that there are these other kind of like radio stations that were like something could be occupying like a space. It could be kind of like right next to you, but it's on another kind of like fundamental layer of reality or something like that.
Right.
And so it could seem like it blips in, and it's almost like not like necessarily teleporting, because what it's really doing is almost like downshifting or upshifting or something. I don't know. And it seems that some of these, when we hear about this portaling or ships or people even being like levitated and floated out through a wall or something like that, it seems that whatever like this advanced technology it is, a lot of it is taking advantage of, a lot of it starts to make sense if you think like, well, they're like, maybe they can kind of like manipulate these like little shifts in phase, if you want to call it that, or something like that. And it could help explain like, how could somebody go through a wall? How could somebody like portal in? How could these things happen? And maybe people speculate like, oh, it's the nuclear stuff. Like that's why they're paying attention to us or something like that, right? And like maybe another layer of that is like, what if we were also very close to figuring that out? What if we were very close to figuring out how to like becoming aware of like this whole other living ecosystem, like this whole other living environment that is like just next to us somehow or something?
No,
I mean,
yeah,
it's total speculation.
No, but Luis Elizondo talks about that a lot. I don't know if you listen to his interviews. He's like, he proposes that possibility that we're living in a world and this other world is just outside of our ability to perceive, and the technology is catching up to where we're able to perceive it. I don't know what technology he's speaking about, but yeah, I mean, maybe that's why that's supposedly why contact is increasing, or as far as sightings. I'm going to take a question related to what you said earlier from Kristen. Have you ever met anyone else? And yeah, Kristen earlier had given a super chat question. Who is Kristen to you?
Kirsten is Kirsten Blackburn is another co-founder of the Experiencer Group.
Okay.
So I know Kirsten, and Kirsten and I both used to do work for Richard Dolan's site back in the day, and so Kirsten was Richard's primary assistant for a while, things like that. But like so anyway, let's see. So that's really cute. Thanks, Kirsten. Question: have you met anyone else describe the strange tilted way that the gray was moving? Did it remind you at all of an insect spider? Yeah, it did. And I have heard other people. There's another experiencer on like that I know through the support groups on the experiencer group site, and he, I won't name him, and I won't go into too much detail, but we had a private conversation. He had similar experience. He has fragmentary memories, and he has a memory of he has a fully conscious memory of seeing a mantis being in like a field, like in the middle of the day when he was a kid in this kind of rural environment. And then he also had this kind of fragmentary memory of grays, and he, it was like, and he had thought that it was a dream, right? He chalked it up to being a dream. But then when he heard how I described them, when he heard my description, we got into a conversation about it, and it was a bracing moment for him, because he was like, I think it made him realize that maybe that wasn't a dream after all, because it was a very, very similar situation. But yeah, and it's interesting because like people have different descriptions. Sometimes people talk about grays as like floating and hovering, and I've seen that happen a couple times where their feet actually aren't touching the floor, and it's like they themselves are levitating like a few inches off the ground. And then some people talk about this like weird shuffle, and then there's also this kind of like marionette movement. And so, is that a discrepancy, or is that like, is that different classes of these beings? Maybe there are clearly different types of grays from what it seems like. Some have a very uniform mushroom colored skin. Some have like a more kind of like mottled, like almost have actually have kind of like marks on their skin and things like that. And so, is that a different type of being entirely that just has a bulbous head and is similar? Like, I'm not sure, but maybe that helps explain like the differences in the body movements. I don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to say, your mantis experience, have you had a lot of them?
I mean, there's been a few notable instances, and then there's a lot of like fragmentary memories. And so I think this happens for a lot of people, where there's some very key like waking, like fully awake experiences, and then there's other situations where it almost feels like like you've been manipulated into some kind of like dazed haze, almost like state. And so you'll just have these like little blips like of a fragmentary memory. But yeah, I mean, like
do they look, I mean, for me, I can't imagine seeing a large mantis being. What exactly, I mean, is it just basically what I see a praying mantis on a larger scale, or is it different? Can you describe exactly what they look like?
Sure. Yeah, there's actually an illustration in Richard Dolan's latest book, Alien Agendas, of a mantis being, and it's actually illustrating one of my encounters. I'm not named in there, but it's like a count. And let me see if I can. Yeah, I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but like that, like that's actually a pretty accurate
Okay,
picture. I mean, it's definitely
as scary as
translated.
I thought it would be.
Yeah. They often wear like these kind of cloaks, and like some people describe them as robes or capes, and there are different versions of this but like this particular one, it's like a 3/4 sleeve. Like their hands do that weird, this kind of like weird thing, right? And like
Yeah.
but like they yeah, the like kind of a thin neck, like it's I'm not, and I don't know what's up with the cloaks, you know what I mean? Is that I'm like this particular piece of clothing, it was actually kind of like, it's not as heavy as it looks. Like it was actually kind of like a nylon, almost like a water repellent kind of fabric. It seemed like something that you could almost like hose off. So it seemed like it had some kind of utilitarian angle. And I've seen that in situations where that were like medical situations. So it may be like kind of like a scrubs kind of scenario. I'm not sure. And then
Or they
there are
they
other.
decided they needed this. They got around together and like, guys, we need something that stands out. What can we come up with? They're like, how about the cloak? I'm like, okay, it's good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a kind of like ridiculous angle to it where it's like you're already like this giant creature. Like you don't have to like be so majestic and have such pageantry about the whole thing or whatever. But I mean, like I get it. They have a weird body type, so just wearing kind of like a big form like that makes sense. But like
Right.
maybe another angle there is like, again, this is total speculation, but it's like, it's disturbing enough just seeing the hands and the head. And like maybe there's also an element where it's just like maybe we'll freak them out 5% less if they don't see 80% of our body. You know what I mean? Like, but I'm not really sure. I have no idea.
And we talked about earlier, we speculated that maybe that's not even maybe it's not really their form. We talked about how the whole lights in the sky is a distraction. It's different. The intelligence is something different. Maybe these are proxy forms that they take. They're able to create with advanced 3D printing, craft bodies. Total speculation. And it's not my idea. I mean, Valet, Keel, they all speculated about it. That's the first time I heard it was reading John Keel's book. But yeah, as you said, it's scary enough. I mean, I a lot of credit to you, Jay, and people who experiencing these, because I don't know what I would do. I mean, first of all, about speaking publicly, you're brave, and second of all, I'd be scared
or dumb
or just in my room at night, let alone.
I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
What'd you say?
You said you're brave, and I said or dumb. Maybe I'm just like I'm kidding. I'm playing around for fun. I'm just trying to.
No, but it's like I'd be scared. I'd be scared seeing a human in my room at whatever time of the night, let alone a giant praying mantis. I mean, it's just so. Yeah. If it is some sort of proxy, why would you do that? It's such a scary form,
Yeah, and at the same time, I recognize that this is going to be like that. This is hard for some people because like they may have like an understanding of grays, or that maybe something, it's clearly pervasive in popular culture, the idea of the grays. And this is like a being that hasn't been really portrayed much in popular culture. So even that as a conceptual thing might be hard for some people, but they definitely seem like in situations where they and grays are around, they definitely seem to be, kind of like running the show. They definitely seem to be kind of like have an overseeing supervisorial kind of angle to things. And they definitely, and like, there's a lot of energy. Like it's hard to put into words because I think that over the course of time, one of the things that we need to get over or get through within ufology or within these topics is that we need to figure out these terms. We need to figure out like a clear set of terms for some of this stuff, because like I think a lot of stuff, like when somebody says like it felt like energy, and some people hear that and they're like, oh, this is like woo or something like that.
Right.
But like if we can like get into what that feels like, if we can get into like actually kind of like, you know, like cataloging this stuff and like trying to, and like agreeing to some terms, then we can probably get a lot further and maybe actually figure a few things out. You know what I mean? So anyway, like the on top of like the look is that like it's a, like when one of these beings is around, it's like a really charged environment. They clearly have like the upper hand in the situation, and also like, but also they speak differently. Like their communication method is really elegant. It's not like the Greys. It's really it's like these like with Greys and stuff like that, it's almost like receiving a telegram, like word by word, like don't be afraid. You know what I mean? This kind of like like these, and it just appears in your head. You know what I mean? But the like the way a mantis being, or the ones that I've encountered anyway, like it's a very different method, and it's almost like these little bubbles of like kind of like a like an enmeshed like like sense of like word pictures showing in your head. So it'll be like maybe like a sentence, and almost like a GIF, almost like a gesture with like a picture attached to it, and then some like really key words, but somehow it's kind of like it comes at you like 8 words in a picture, 8 words in a picture, and it has this like really like weirdly poetic like element to it, where it kind of like these like it kind of unfolds in your head, these associations, and it's like actually like it seems like a really efficient way to communicate in a strange way. And so like
people talk about downloads. Is that similar? Or it sounds a little different?
It's, yeah, I'm not, you know, like I think that download again, that's like I think that that's like a phrase that maybe there's like 100 different things that could be turned to a download. You know what I mean? Maybe that's a whole class of communication. I'm not sure, you know. And so like I'm sure to some people this might seem more like a download, because it's a different way of communicating, and it's not how we speak in this kind of like linear, you know, word by word way. It's almost like a little bubble of like a few words and like an action or something like that, and like through, and it happens sequentially, and it's almost as if they're monitoring like how you're unpacking it as you're unpacking it. And so like you'll get hit with a couple, and then they'll kind of wait for a second for you to like map out what this is, and then they'll like hit you with more of that. And it shows like this like remarkable mastery of or maybe it's not, but like it's like definitely the upper hand in terms of like not just communicating with you, but clearly having an awareness of how you're receiving it and kind of perceiving it. So like they'll kind of like go in and correct things. So as you're perceiving this stuff and trying to kind of like logically work through it, like they can somehow read that and clarify like if you're having a misreading of like any of this kind of communication. Does that make sense to you?
It does. That's interesting. I'd never heard that before.
Yeah.
They actually,
Yeah.
you know, they can actually understand that you're struggling and adjust, which is amazing. And have you ever undergone hypnosis to try to recover any more memories?
Yeah, I did. I like for this only once, and it was a great hypnotherapist that in Manhattan, and I haven't talked to her for a little while. I hope she's still working. I don't know what her situation has been since the pandemic, but I think it was back in 2017 or so, 2017, 2018. I'd have to go back and like I have a recording of it, but and it was a. Do you want me to talk about like what that situation was, or
Sure.
like?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's related to
Yeah.
this, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I did once, and the reason I've only done it once is because like I do like take into account the viewpoint by some that, you know, the idea that hypnosis could like kind of manipulate or corrupt your memories or something like that. And so like I'm not sure if that, you know, I'm agnostic about that. I don't know enough about hypnosis. I don't know enough about consciousness to have like any say in that, but I'm aware that that's a possibility. And so like I've been mindful that I don't want to go and like at this stage of the game where I'm at right now, I don't want to go back and like do hypnosis on every single one of these situations because
Right.
like it's like I think that it's handy for me, and like having the waking, like even if it's a fragmentary memory, like I still like I know that it's the memory that I have. And so, but I will say that like that one regression that I had was like a really life-changing experience in terms of like how fascinating it was to be in that kind of hypnotic state and to kind of like relive something in such a in such an amazing way. It was a situation where I was in Miami for a wedding with my ex-wife, and one of the reasons why I had this done is because like my ex-wife was with me and saw a a UAP, like this kind of like energetic ball, like come towards the window of this like high rise we were at, like off of South Beach, Miami. And so, so it was a situation where like we both like you know, there was another witness, and there was something about it that I knew that I was missing something key, right? And so to make a long story short, like we had just gotten home from this wedding, I looked, and for some reason I had this sense, like it was almost like the hair standing up on the back of my neck kind of situation, like that weird feeling of being watched, you know what I mean? Or just like, what is that? And for whatever reason, I look out the window and I look down, and you know, it's this big high-rise fancy building, and like there's, you know, it was night, and there's like one of those, there's an outdoor pool, and it was like illuminated, like a lot of people keep pools at night, right? And so the pool was kind of like lit up from inside of itself, you know, and so I looked down, and then like between like a few stories down, we were on maybe like we were on an upper floor, like it was like over 10 floors up, and or around there. And I look, and a few stories down, there's like where right where I'm looking, this like strange like ball of electricity just like pops right in, like right where I'm looking. And it grew. And I called my ex-wife over, and I was like, and at first she was like, what? And let's get, and she looks out the window, and like this like energetic ball is growing, and then it just starts moving towards the window that we're looking out. Okay. And my ex, she like looks at me, like total panic in her eyes, and she starts like moving away from the window. But right as she does, like it's as if she got like that situation where it's like she got knocked out or something like that, like something made her, whatever happened, but like it's like she was falling unconscious. And like one of my last waking memories was this thing like reaching the window, and me having to catch her head because it was like a marble floor, like a stone floor.
Right.
And like I didn't want her to hit her head, right? So like like I just was able to catch her as she's falling, and then like I'm kind of being made to pass out too. And so then like the regression kind of like helped me like see a lot of the, and like I had a couple little fragments from that, like just a couple minutes in from that, but the regression like involved two mantis beings and like a surgical procedure of some sort, and me kind of like being blipped over into this kind of like operating room of some sort. And like, you know, and there were like weird details, like, and but like as far as like corroborating, like an interesting thing is that like I didn't have a waking memory of like what the of like the weather that night or anything like that. Like I, like, you know, it had been years, and like, but when I listened to the tape after, and then when I went through the regression, it was like, you know, like the whole room, you know, I was like, oh yeah, it was like that. And like, and I was able to corroborate that the weather was, you know, the weather, like, you know, I was like, oh, it was raining. It was raining, you know, like in the regression, like all of a sudden, all these details popped in that were true, but like were not things that I like actively remembered in my waking state. And so, you know, like, where does that, you know, where does that sit with the other stuff? Does that make the other stuff true? Of course, not necessarily. You know what I mean? But it was, but it was, I mean, like, it's fascinating. It's a fascinating thing to do, and like, it's a fascinating state that the brain can get itself into. And like, I was totally scared about doing it. And I don't even. And why was I scared? Like, you know, this woman was like, you know, maybe 70 years old. Like maybe she's like 110 pounds. What did I think she was gonna do? You know what I mean? I was scared. Like, oh, she's gonna hypnotize me, and something bad's gonna happen. You know what I mean? And like, and I didn't have, and like the only thing really scary was like that I had more recall, seemingly, of the situation. You know what I mean?
So you had memories of some sort of surgery. Do you have other experiences with waking memories without? Obviously, that was your only hypnosis. Some similar to that. I mean, what are your memories of what they do, of what you can recall during these encounters, and when you're, I guess, call it abductions. I know not everyone is an abduction, or is it?
I mean, I wouldn't necessarily always. I mean, clearly there were plenty of times, and I like earlier in my life, especially in my 20s, where I was definitely being taken against my will. No doubt about that. And so, like, I did not want this stuff to be happening, you know, and and I was deeply traumatized by it. I was really scared. I like, and so, you know, I think that in my case, like, not all of my anomalous experience could be termed as abductions, but abductions definitely happened. And, you know, like, there's that whole debate, you know, the Barbara Lambs or whoever in the world that, you know, on some level you wanted this to happen. And like, I don't, like, I'm not so sure, you know, either way about that. But I do know that like this was happening against my wishes, like at the time, a lot of the time that this was happening, to put it that way. But to along with what you're saying, though, yeah, there are other like medical type procedures done. Yeah, there's another one in Richard's book that I have like a waking memory of, and I didn't know we were going to go so far with this stuff, but it's okay, you know, like, but
you don't have to if you don't want to.
No, it's okay. It's okay. You know, I'm just being mindful of like how odd this must be for some of the people that are listening, but you know, what can you do?
And let me know when your time is short, because I know you've been doing a lot today.
Oh, sure. But yeah, but like, okay, so like one experience that I could describe is that there's a situation where like I I had been taken, and this was maybe I think this would have been 2016, so 5 years ago. And I like through my 30s, like I wore glasses, right? I like this, like I had like this eye was like had an astigmatism and problems, right? And so I wore glasses, and weirdly one night, I don't have to wear glasses anymore. Okay, and that's kind of like the end of the story. I'm kind of it's, spoiler alert, but like I wake up and like I had been taken. I was in this kind of like operating room situation. I was like in a half reclined position, and my head was kind of like tucked against my chest so that like I kind of couldn't move my head. All right. And and this and a being um like held this like strange device that was um not really like a caduceus, but like a kind of like a rod-ish shape, but it had like ridges on it. Okay. And like the end of it, there's like a little ball. And basically what happened was like this being like placed this thing in front of my right eye. All right. It just like held it in front of my eye, and it somehow activated this device such that like the end of this thing kind of like extended out, and these 3 or 4 pincers opened out of this thing, right? So it almost had this kind of like snaky movement. It reaches in under my eyelid, my right eye, pops my eye out. All right. And like all of a sudden, I don't know if anybody that's going to be watching this now or later has ever had an experience like this, but like when that happens, like all of a sudden it's like 2 cameras. It's like camera A, camera B.
Huh.
Like you don't have unified sight anymore, right? So like this one was basically covered by this like pincer device. And then from my left eye, I'm looking over and I can see this thing, my eyeball, and then like the I can't remember what you call it, but like the like string that like connects your eye to your head is like it's just like, and it was out like maybe that far from my head. Okay. And and then I could see this other almost like a tweezer or something like that, like kind of like being inserted like under it. And like other than that, and seeing a few beings like in my peripheral vision off back, I don't remember what happened after that. I think I was like made to black out, or maybe I like out from fear like at that moment. But I woke up the next morning and I was like, God, that was really disturbing. You know what I mean? Like, wake up, that's really disturbing. And over the next couple of days, I realized I was going longer and longer without putting my glasses on. You know what I mean? Normally, like looking at the computer, reading,
Right.
going outside, I'd throw my glasses on because otherwise I would start getting a headache, right? And and I realized, and like within a few days after that, I realized like I'm just gonna not wear my glasses today because maybe I don't need to. Like I can see like I had a situation where it's like my focus wasn't so great at about this distance. All right. And then I recognized, I was like, wait a second, like I can focus like closer again. And then over time I recognized that I didn't have to wear my glasses anymore. I kept them for posterity, but and so I don't know what the hell that was. I don't know if that was a byproduct. I don't know if it was a side of you know what I mean? Like, was that like a convenient side effect of whatever they were doing? Like, were they trying, you know what I mean? Were they trying to fix my vision, or did they just have to do something? And then they were like, they left it better than they found it or something like that. I don't know. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Or maybe they're, I think maybe they're, and obviously we're speculating, they're doing what they need to do on their end. And then one of them's like, you know what, let's throw the guy a bone. We've been doing all this stuff to him. Let's fix his eyesight while we're at it. It's like, Because I'm
I
like,
mean,
what do you think? I mean, what do you think of all this? What is going on? I mean, I know, yeah, it's obviously we're speculating here, but it's like,
mhm.
do you have like a favorite hypothesis of what's going on with you specifically over all these years?
I mean, they're definitely again speculation, and I don't know. You know what I mean? And I very clearly I don't know, but there definitely has been since especially in my 20s, I have more fragmentary memories of like medical procedures where it seemed like they were kind of taking diagnostics or fluids and things like that, and it seemed like they were kind of like keeping a record like of me, you know what I mean, like doing like a workup or something, like I don't like taking some kind of readings like regularly, um and so like I know that's I'm pretty dang sure about that. I have plenty enough memories of that. um but why were they doing it? I mean, like there there does seem to be something to the genetic, I there there now I'm getting like really dicey about what I want to say, but like I because it's controversial, but like there does seem to be they definitely like whatever that particular group of beings are, or some of them or whatever. um and I think that like I've had more than just this one group of like medical experimenting beings, right? Because the like I don't know what the ghost poltergeist stuff is, and this is really common, on the experiencer group. Like it's actually more the rule than the exception, that like a lot of experiencers will have more than one modality, or it's not just one encounter. Like people used to discredit people for having like more than one encounter, but like like from the numbers and from the cases that I know of, it would be much more notable if something only happened once to somebody than happening much more frequently. And people don't want to admit that, but it's usually the case. So apart from that, I'm not sure. It seems like they're definitely interested in our body process and stuff like that, and I'm not sure why. I don't know if it's, we could talk about the hybrid program or manipulation, sorts of stuff like that. Like I don't have an answer. All I know is that, and it kind of makes sense to me. Like if we got to some other environment and there were biological entities there, we would probably, we do that in our own oceans. You know what I mean? Like marine biologists and stuff like that. We study everything that we can find. So it kind of makes it in that way. If it's even just that, that makes, that would make sense to me, but I'm not sure.
Before I definitely want to touch on one thing, as far as your friends and how this has affected your friends and how you've lost friends. Because when I heard you talk about that, I was like, yeah, that must be tough. Can you just talk about some of the experiences you had as far as your friends and having them have experiences while they were around you?
Sure. Yeah, and it's actually, and like I appreciate you asking, and I appreciate that you actually mentioned that you wanted to ask about that before we started tonight, because there like, and I appreciate your sensitivity towards that, because it's one of those things where like often these topics can bring up some like really sad and traumatic memories for people, right? And like I'm able to talk about that surgery thing, but like what, and I've kind of like processed that more, but it like losing friends over this stuff has been really difficult. um but when I was about 19 years old, I had two friends that well, there were like three or four friends that I really palled around with at that time, and what it came down to is that like one of those friends was able to integrate being privy to paranormal experiences happening when he was around me, and two of my friends were not able to integrate that. They all recognized, and I at that time was able to kind of like readily admit that you know, like sometimes weird stuff happened around me, you know, and sometimes like poltergeist type phenomena, like things moving around, maybe kind of like what Eric Davis was talking about there. And that would be like, and then sometimes people would kind of sense presences kind of blipping in or something like this, and kind of like things moving around, and one guy, like I won't name him, but there's a very strange situation where we were at his place, and and this strange voice, it was as if something was like aware and like right there, but on some like next level or some like next phase or something like that. And it spoke, and it was like a voice was coming out. Like we couldn't see whoever this was, but we heard this voice, like as if somebody was talking like 4 feet from you or something like this. And like I'd prefer not to go into the details too much about that, but like it was very, very scary. It was like in a lifetime of very scary events, that was like deeply frightening. And he stopped hanging out with me. He became a born again Christian because like after that, and like nothing against, you know, people with their religion or whatever, but like his understanding, his way of processing that was that like this stuff was evil or like demonic or something like that. And like his way, he didn't want, he like, it kind of like shifted him into a phase where he was like, this stuff is real, it's bad, I want to do whatever the opposite of that is. And his way of dealing with that was getting really into, you know, like evangelical Christian faith, right? And not hanging out with me.
Right.
And another friend of mine who's like a pretty successful musician, and he and I won't name him either, but similar situation, like just encountering, like it was just like enough situations, maybe a handful of times, where he encountered like what could be thought of as poltergeist phenomena, like when near me, you know, when hanging out with me. And eventually it was just too much. And I actually hung out and like stopped hanging out with me. And then I actually ran into him in Minneapolis a few years ago. My mom lives out in the Twin Cities. I went back there to visit her, and ran into him. I was with my partner. We were in the car. I saw him on the side of the street, and I was like, you know, I said his name, and whoa, hadn't seen him in years, like over a decade. And he said where he's gonna, like a bar he was gonna hang out later that night. He was like, come by. So get there later on, you know, like a couple hours in, my partner goes to the bathroom, and he like takes kind of advantage of the moment. And he was like, I'm really sorry about what happened, but I stopped hanging out with you, and that stuff never happened again. And then and he was like, so I'm sorry, but I hope you understand. And I was like, yeah, no, I do understand. So, you know, and it was night. We had a great night, you know, and like it was great to be able to have that kind of acknowledgement, you know. But you know, it hurt. Like this is a guy that, you know, like like I admired him. Like we hung out a lot. He's one of my very best friends, and and that became like such a. It was at that point that I was already scared about talking to people about this stuff, but it was at that point that I was like, okay, people can never know about this. Like I need to do whatever I can to hide this, to keep this a secret, because like I don't want to face that kind of loss and abandonment ever again.
Yeah, I can't imagine people listening to that. Why would somebody like, make these stories up, and you sharing something? I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm not making light of this. I think there will, now that you're public, I think there will be people on the opposite end. There are people that are going to want to hang out with you to have experiences. They will be, because there are people. I haven't had experiences. I don't want experiences. I've never asked for experiences. I'm okay, but I know there are other people who do. It's really similar to people who go to something like Skinwalker Ranch, which I would not go to. So it's like you're the human version of that. I'm not making light of it. It's just really interesting to me that happens, and I feel, I'm sorry you lost friends like that. How is your current partner handle it?
She's great. She's amazing. I mean, like, and like I mean, that kind of stuff, like it really hit a high point in my 20s. And so it's like, I'm not like, to be clear, like I'm not like the David Copperfield of Poltergeist phenomena. Like you can't just like hang out with me and be sure that something like that would, like, it doesn't work that way. You know what I mean? But like, so, at this stage of the game, stuff still, it's more sporadic, and I think that part of it is like me being more clear about my boundaries. I think the meditation stuff helps. I think that I live a healthier lifestyle than I did back then. I think that but at the end of the day, I don't know why, like the nature of things is different now, but, or that things, that it's that different modes happen and it's more sporadic. But she's great. Like she's been around for a few really, intense situations, and she has been able to integrate it. She's been able to, there's one night, for example, where like I again got that kind of spidey sense, like I was talking about with Miami, where it's just kind of, and experiencers talk about this often, this kind of like, almost as if you suddenly are aware that you're being monitored in some way, or that something's about to happen. And sometimes it's because of something that you're just barely perceptible of. There's sometimes like a hum or like a light that comes into play. But like but I was just like, I was kind of like, oh nah, yeah, it's gonna be one of those nights. And so it doesn't really make sense, but for it, like, just to kind of like lodge my complaint, lodge my like not tonight, I went over to the door, and like I had my backpack was like full, I think my laptop was in there, some other stuff was in there, so it's like a heavy backpack. I closed the bedroom door and I put the backpack in front of it, as just a way of being, as just kind of like, no, you know what I mean? And for whatever reason, and then I start walking away from the door, and then like I get really fragmentary at that point. My partner, on the other hand, it turns out she was awake when I was doing this. I didn't recognize that she was awake. I didn't recognize that she saw me doing this. But her memory of this, I didn't see this part, but she saw the the backpack somehow move out of the way of the door, and the door open, and she saw like some kind of like movement, like of something like in the doorway. And then she said she hid under the covers and passed out. And so you know, there's been a few situations like that where she's like definitely kind of like walked up to the edge and has seen like anomalous things. Um, and and amazingly, you know, she's very open to this stuff. Like she's a very thoughtful, curious person, and I think she's, you know, she's pretty like, she was not like somebody when we first got together, she was not somebody that really kind of entertained a lot of this stuff. She wasn't like a big ufology fan. She wasn't like a sci-fi person really. She was like, but over the course of us knowing each other, like this whole like it's like it really opened up like a dialogue for us. And like, you know, like now it's just like the house is like filled with books about these topics, and like we talk about this stuff all the time, and like, and it's, and like, and I can trust her, you know, and I think that that was that, along with the experiencer group and along with meditation, but maybe as much as any of those things, was having a partner that was supportive and could integrate that stuff.
No, that's great. That's great. I'm happy for you.
Thank you.
Have people around you have experiences when you're not around? Do you have to be there for, or do they have experiences on their own?
Oh gosh, that's hard to say, because like, you know, if they're in proximity to me and something weird happens to them, like here's something interesting. I was just hanging out with a friend of mine, who now lives in Florida, right? And we were just talking about this last night, and he and one of my other friends who was there last night as well, they spotted a huge UFO when they were driving down to Virginia for his wedding. And like, I like at the last minute I couldn't go for work. And the amazing thing is that like we've been friends for like, I've been friends with this guy for like about 20 years now. And like I'd been like hiding this about myself from him, and like he and my other friend like had conveniently avoided talking about how they both had spotted this like enormous craft like hovering over the highway on the way to his wedding. And it's just like, how many of those kinds of conversations are people avoiding right now? You know what I mean? Like how much of the time it's just like, if the stigma wasn't there, like, you know what I mean? It's like, sometimes it's just like, is this like half of everybody? Is it more than half of everybody? You know, I'm not sure. You know what I mean? Like it's clearly more than it's clearly more than some people think, right? But
That's
as far as like, what's that? Go ahead.
No, I'm
What?
agreeing. Definitely. Yeah. Just a matter of, you said how much.
Yeah. And so like, I don't think that I'm like in situations with people around me, I don't think I'm necessarily the key to this stuff like at all. I think that it's just like, this stuff is like, we often call it like anomalous, you know, studies, and at the same time, like a lot of the stuff seems to be just like really baked into like the fabric of like our day-to-day reality, and we just aren't aware of it, or we avoid it, or we don't want to have these conversations sometimes. But like you know, I think a lot of this stuff happens a lot more than people want to admit. And like, I didn't want to admit it myself either, but like I realized that it's like co-creating, you know, the experiencer group with Stuart and Kirsten. It's like I like there like realizing that like, okay, like somebody has to do this, you know what I mean? And like you know, behind these closed doors there's hundreds of people, thousands of people that are like, you know, like that are brilliant, thoughtful, like incredible people, like some of the most admirable people I've ever met have been in these communities. And of course they can't talk, like they don't want to get fired, they don't want to lose credibility. You know, we're talking about people that like run, you know, I, you know, not going to name anybody here, but like, you know, like some of these, like, like there's a lot at stake, you know, like people have kids, you know, they're like, if people are seen to be mentally unwell by somebody else, like that can be an extraordinarily subjective situation. And there's a
Right.
lot of reasons to like, you want to protect your bank account, you want to protect your job, you want to protect your family, you want to protect your kids. And so I get it. But at the same time, it's like, well, like, I mean, I recognize that this is going to be like, that there are probably going to be situations in the future where like agreeing to do this article with Ralph Blumenthal and like, you know, and becoming public about this, I'm sure that there are going to be times in the future where this is going to kind of like where it might, you know, kind of bite me in the behind, you know. But like at the same time, like it, like we need to keep pushing this ball down the field, because like these are like it's like what else are we doing if we don't keep asking big questions, like how like how are we going to progress, right? And like and the thing is that this stuff happens whether we want to acknowledge it or not. And if we can acknowledge it, and if we can have these conversations, then we're going to have less people that are like, you know, there's plenty of experiencers that their way of denying this, or their way of kind of like dealing with like consensus reality, like the day-to-day popular culture that does not acknowledge this stuff, you know, it's like substance abuse, there's a lot of that, chronic depression, people get hospitalized about this stuff, people commit suicide over this, like there's a lot of that. And like it doesn't, and like that shouldn't, you know, we need to get past this, if nothing else, so that more people can like live healthier, productive lives. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I hope we make progress on that front, because I mean, even on the basic UFO front, it's hard to get people acknowledging that it's real. But I will do, and I've, you know, I talk about how people are like, you need to stick with nuts and bolts. I'm like, listen, I'm not going to. I'm gonna cover nuts and bolts. I'm gonna cover the regular news. I'm gonna cover Luis Elizondo. I'm gonna cover ATIP, but I can also cover experiencers. I said I can multitask. I mean, especially now you telling me about your experiences and losing friends and other people out there. And I don't know, have the answers to how we get to that point, but I think we're going in that direction. I wish I could be Mr. Positive and say, oh, it's going to happen. Hey, don't worry about it. You know, 6 months we'll be there, but I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But I'm going to let you go. I just want to say real quickly, your mom did see some things, right? She did see some phenomena.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, and she, I mean, like, and there, and I want to be careful here, because like there are other people in my family that have had that also could corroborate things, but like they're not, but like they, my mom is willing to talk about this stuff, and there are other people in my family that have a lifestyle, that have lives that this would be really inconvenient probably. So you know, like, but yeah, there are definitely other people that could corroborate like more along that front too. So, you know, in the days ahead, you know, like I'm like, I know that she like, I don't want to speak for my own mother, right? Like she's been willing to talk about it in the past. And you know, I'm you know, there are other people that I know that have been in the past okay with corroborating elements from this as well, friends, my partner, things like that.
Okay.
So yeah, but yeah.
And if you could stop this right
um
now, the experiences, would you stop it if you could?
oh gosh, no, not anymore. Like the thing is like I still have all my fingers and toes, you know, like I've gone through a lot of processing, you know, and like, and I feel like at this point that, you know, this is kind of, it's like some of this sensing seems to just kind of like be built into my physiology or something like that. I don't have an explanation for how or why that would be, and I don't know why me. I have no idea. But uh but like I recognize that if I were to wish for that, like it doesn't seem like that's like a wish. I don't necessarily think that that's something that's on the table anyway, you know. But and at the same time, like I think that I've reached a point with my kind of inner work and my processing and kind of like getting to a good place in my own head, for the most part, where you know, like I I would like to be able to continue, uh, like working through these thoughts, these topics, and like with the state that I'm in now versus the scared, deeply frightened person that I was. And I recognize that that level of engagement is it doesn't necessarily mean that something else is going to happen or something's not going to happen, but I recognize that being mindful and and of these topics and like doesn't necessarily discourage contact, if that makes sense.
No, no, it
Yeah,
does.
yeah.
And
Um,
when can people expect to see the roundtable with all of the experiences from Ralph's article?
oh, I hope to have that up, uh, may like within about 24 hours,
Oh,
hopefully
great.
sooner. Like we talked for about 3 hours, and some of it is going to have to get cut out because it was confidential. But like it was such a productive conversation, and I can't wait for people to hear it because I mean it's it's really awesome, and like I'm humbled with the depth of thought and engagement that happened in that conversation, and it's just great. So yeah, that'll be like we'll post it to the experiencer groups. Well, I mean, like you'll see it on Twitter. It'll come up on the experiencer groups feed, and we'll put it up on our YouTube channel, and it'll be available through like Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Audible, the usual places for podcasts. Um, yeah, but I'm looking forward to that, and I'm looking forward to continuing these conversations. You know, this is you know, this isn't the end of the conversation. This is the beginning of a conversation, a longer conversation that can go on for months and years to come.
I
So I
appreciate
really
it.
deeply appreciate. I
Yeah,
really
me
deeply
too.
appreciate you having me on the show and keeping an open mind. I really deeply appreciate that. I appreciate you thinking about this, and covering the story, and and keeping and to any of your listeners out there as well. Like I appreciate all the open mindedness and support that people have shown me and other people in recent days, because it's deeply appreciated.
Yeah, well,
Yeah,
thank you.
and
Go ahead. Sorry.
no, it's I like, you know, there like for months I've been, and I know some of the other people involved in this too that were like, oh my gosh, like um uh you know, wondering what this was going to be like. And you know, I was really happy, you know, going to bed Friday night after this article got posted and being like, you know, there's no you know, nobody's out, there's no mob outside my apartment with pitchforks or whatever, you know what I mean, like no, like, and I've been really happily surprised at the humanity and the support that I've seen, and I really appreciate that. And I know that it's not always going to be like that, but I appreciate that, at least for the purposes of this weekend, that's been the case, and you've been a part of that, Joe, and I appreciate that.
You're welcome, Jay. Thank you so much. And yeah, we'll have your back in the days going forward. You know, I really appreciate it. And I will try to show some of my family members this who really aren't familiar with these kind of cases. So it's really helpful on that front. And we'll talk again. I really appreciate it.
Wonderful. I really appreciate it, Joe. Have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you soon, okay?
All right, Jay. Have a good night.
Thank you.
That was great. Everybody, I tried to follow the comments as best as I could. It's kind of hard. I'm trying to listen to. I don't know how people do it like that. I need a producer. That was, you know, for Jay to come out. I mean, he only came out Friday. Friday was the first time he went public. So this is brand new for him too. And hopefully everybody enjoyed it. And I will have more experiencers on in the future. And I really look forward to that roundtable. So, and tonight with Danny Silva and UFO Jesus, I'll be on Coast to Coast with George Knapp, 10 p.m. Pacific. And hopefully you guys listen. And I will see you on Twitter. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks for all the comments. Thanks for the super chats to everybody. Sorry if I missed a question. I appreciate people watching and listening and engaging. Have a good night, everybody.